Well, welcome everybody. Great to see you all here. Starting a little late, I'm sorry, but it was good that everybody had a chance to come in and get yourselves comfortable. The announcement today is a quick one. It's around our fundraising events that we have here at FSS. Starting today, we have one at 12:30. It's our Italian lunch. And then we also have some items outside, as you'll see, shirts, bags, and some other things that, if you wish to get one, let us know, and we'll help you out. Today, I was going to do the talk in Portuguese and English. It was going to be all over the place, so I think I'll stick to English, but I'll still have some text in Portuguese for some those of you who can't still understand the words in English. You'll have some Portuguese as well. And to start off, we usually start with reading a text from one of the books from Chico Xavier. Today we'll start with Our Daily Bread. And it's one of those books that reflects upon some passages from the Gospel. And the chapter today is called The Logic of Providence. And it's from a passage from Paul in his letters to the Hebrews, chapter 10, when Paul said, "After you were illuminated, you endured a great struggle against afflictions." Usually those who cultivate a sincere faith are considered great sufferers in the world. In fact, there are those who affirm that they deliberately avoid from religious circles because they fear the contagion of spiritual suffering. In everyday life, the godless, the ignorant, and the frivolous exhibit themselves spectacularly through bizarre shades of outward fantasy. However, as they approach the heavenly truths before attaining access to the lasting joy of a higher spirituality, they pass through long tunnels of sadness, downheartedness, and tenacity. This is natural, for there will be always much soul searching after insanity and remorse brought on by immoderation. The problem, however, entails a larger explanation. The mercy that is manifested in God's justice transcends human comprehension. The Father confers on his ignorant and lost children the right of more trying experiences only after they've been enlightened. Only after they have learned to see with their eternal spirit will life offer them different values. From that moment on, the strength needed to triumph as the great battle of afflictions will be born in their hearts. In spite of the appearances, frivolous persons and opportunists are usually frail souls, whose withered branches will break at the first blow of the storm. Noble spirits who are able to withstand the torments of the earthly pathway are well aware of this. Only spiritual enlightenment guarantees success in trials. No one entrusts the responsibility of a ship encumbered with preoccupations and dangers to mere children. So let us start with a prayer, a quick prayer. I invite you all to close your eyes and take a deep breath so we can arrive. So we can start to attune our thoughts, our minds, our feelings with our guardian angel, with Jesus, with our Father. And as we start to breathe, as we start to connect with our inner self, we ask Jesus, we ask the Master to inspire us, all of us here today, so that we can open our hearts and take upon the love that he shares with us constantly. We ask you, Christ, that we may learn from your words, we may learn from your examples, so we can become part of your journey, to make our journey closer and closer to yours. In this talk, we ask that we may find the meaning of being a Spiritist, that we may find the enlightenment and the joys that the doctrine can provide to us. And in doing so, we ask you that you help us on our day-to-day lives so we can start to apply all the teachings that you give us. And in doing so, we hope to transcend the today, evolving for a better tomorrow. So be it. Nice. I got a full house today. Wow. There's a lot of people. Thank you for coming. And as I said before, I'll try to do a mix between English and Portuguese, just so everybody can understand. But it will be mainly in English. And the talk today is, what does it mean to be a Spiritist? Significa ser espírita. And this talk is based heavily on a talk by Artur Valadares, who is a Spiritist from Brazil, and he gave this talk called Ser Espírita, or to be a Spiritist. And the backbone of our talk today includes passages from the Gospel of Jesus, includes a book called Book of Hope, and also includes our Spirit's book, our Gospel According to Spiritism, and our Medium's book. So a lot of the content that we have from the Spiritist doctrine. And just so you guys understand a little bit about this book, the Book of Hope, or Livro da Esperança, this is a book from Chico Xavier through the Spirit Emmanuel, where he brings not only reflections about the gospel, like we have on books like this, Our Daily Bread, but he brings a passage from the gospel and a passage from the Gospel According to Spiritism at the same time. So in this book is Emmanuel trying to make the parallel between Spiritism and Christianity, bringing the gospel of Jesus and the Gospel According to Spiritism, making this parallel and then showing how they go hand in hand, showing how Spiritism has come, as we'll talk about today, has come to enlighten us through the basis of the Gospel of Jesus. And this book is a book that we actually use on our Mondays, in the studies that we do on Mondays. About the Gospel of Jesus, we utilize this book a lot to help us with our interpretations of the Gospel According to Spiritism. So we'll be taking a text of this, and it will be the backbone of our talk today. So, as some of you have already started reading Emmanuel, who is the Spirit who brings a lot of books through the mediumship of Chico Xavier, we can see in his text a lot of context. There's a lot there that we can spend time reflecting and learning from it. So much so that when we look at the text here today, that is called, be Spiritist, we can talk a lot about just the title, just interpreting the title that he gave us in this text. So what does it mean to be a Spiritist? Right? We can, and I'd like to invite participation from all of you in English or in Portuguese, doesn't matter, around some of the topics that we'll be bringing here today. So what does it mean to you all to be Spiritist? O que significa para você ser espírita? If you'd like to share a little bit about what does it mean to you. And Kardec will bring us what he implied with the word to be a Spiritist, but I'd like to hear from you all if you have anything to share with us. And I know it's just the beginning of the talk, so people are not yet comfortable with sharing, so that's okay. And so we'll ask Kardec. So he said in the Gospel According to Spiritism in chapter 17, he said, the true Spiritist is recognized by his moral transformation and by the efforts he uses to tame his evil inclinations. So it's, and in Portuguese, this is how it goes. Reconhece-se o verdadeiro espírita pela sua transformação moral e pelos esforços que emprega para domar as suas inclinações más. So here, it's interesting when we reflect about this, because Kardec, he didn't say that the true Spiritist is the one that knows all these books front to back, cover to back, that knows all the questions by heart. He said that the true Spiritist is the one that can be seen transforming themselves morally, meaning utilizing all these teachings, right, to evolve themselves, applying the teachings that we're getting from Spiritism and from the Gospel. And Jesus himself said this, as we'll see a little bit later on. So this is it's one of the main explanations or the main meanings of being a Spiritist, is being able to apply the learnings that we take from the Gospel, that we take from Spiritism through our moral transformation. And it's nice because he uses the word recognizes, meaning that we can see this in people through their actions. Right? It's not only the things that they talk, but it's their actions, it's the way they live their lives through their example. It's where Spiritism and the Gospel are ingrained within the person.
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life, absolutely. It's walking the talk, right? As we like to say in English. And Spiritism didn't really come to bring us any new morals, but on a different way of seeing Spiritism is that it's here to facilitate our understanding of the gospel of Jesus through different lenses. Now that we've evolved so much since the time that Jesus came, we have different abilities, morally speaking, to understand different ways of seeing the gospel, and this is why one of the reasons why Spiritism came, right? To enlighten us of the gospel of Jesus, to bring us different interpretations. And to start off, and I don't know how many of you have come across this, but Kardec talks about different types of Spiritism. There are, he describes 3 of them in the Gospel According to Spiritism, but in the Medium's book he actually brings us 4 of them. And we'll talk about all 4 of them, and hopefully the title itself, it's almost self-explanatory in a way. So these are the 4 types. The first one is, and this by the way is in the first part of the Medium's book, chapter 3. The first part, or the first type that Kardec describes are the espíritas experimentadores, or the experimenting spiritists, if you can read that, which are those of us who attain ourselves to the manifestations that we have in Spiritism. So the technicality, the science behind the communications with Spirit, not so much attaining to the teachings and the learnings from the manifestations, but focusing solely on that physical aspect of the manifestations. Hence the name experimental. The second one are the imperfect spiritists, or espíritas imperfeitos. These are the ones who attain themselves to the more philosophical side of Spiritism. As we say, Spiritism has its 3 pillars, being one is the science, one is the philosophy, one is the religion, which these 3 main books, they kind of go hand in hand with that. The Spirit's book kind of shines some light in the philosophical aspect of the doctrine. The Medium's book can talk a little bit more about the scientific aspect of the gospel, of the doctrine, and the gospel according to Spiritism is that religious pillar that kind of brings it all together. So the imperfect spirits, they attain themselves to the philosophical side of things, mostly trying to acquire a lot of knowledge, but leaving all that knowledge in our minds and not bringing them to our actions, to our lives, not bringing it to our way of life, but just keeping it in our minds. And they do something with that knowledge. Instead of applying that knowledge to their lives, they start to apply that knowledge to somebody else's lives. So they start to judge others, right? They start to analyze others against all that knowledge they have and say, well, you're doing this wrong, and you're doing this wrong, you should change this, you should change that, right? As opposed to bringing that knowledge in. Hence the word imperfect. And then the third one, which is the one that he was referencing before, it's the true spiritists, or os verdadeiros espíritas, which are the ones that they were able to, utilize the scientific aspect, the philosophical aspect, and the religious aspect, and bring it all together, and apply that knowledge into our lives, into their lives. So we can walk the talk, so it can become the way of our lives. So instead of focusing on others and trying to change others, we start to focus on ourselves and applying that knowledge to change ourselves. As Kardec mentioned before, you recognize the true spiritist by his or her moral transformation. And then on the medium's book, actually, Kardec brings this last one. He doesn't talk about this one on the Gospel according to Spiritism, but he does bring it to us in the medium's book, which are the exalted spiritists, or os espíritas exaltados. Those are those of us who are very exalted or very excited in a way, and we tend to be a little bit blind regarding all the communications that we get from Spirit. So we believe in everything that we get. We don't apply any discernment, we don't apply any reflection, but we just believe in everything. And as a result, we pass it on. So Kardec actually says that they cause more harm to benefit to Spiritism because they are sharing things that might not be true. So it just causes more harm than benefit. So these are the four. And, a lot of us can see ourselves in all of them. Right? It's not a definite box that we can, put ourselves in. In different aspects of our lives, we can find ourselves here, 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 here. Right? Hopefully we know what the goal is, and hopefully we know what we have to do to get there. But that's why, one of the reasons why we come here, is to learn and try to gauge ourselves and hopefully get to a place where we can be transforming ourselves more. Any comments? Any thoughts? While we start talking about different types of spiritists. Was this new to anybody?
I have a comment just about the last slide. It's so interesting how the spiritist is not someone perfect, right? And sometimes with all this situation that's happening in Brazil with the election, I've been seeing a lot of people posting things like, how come a spiritist, this or that? And like, we have to realize that we are not perfect, but we are trying that moral transformation by doing efforts to tame our bad inclinations. And then going to the next slide, all the stats and think about, wow, yeah, I think for some things I might be in one of the the categories, let's say that, but in other ones, like, wow, am I being? I always thought I was not as much as the exalted spiritist in the last few years, at least. But sometimes I catch myself like, why am I not thinking about what I'm saying? Am I practicing? Am I just repeating the beautiful sentences to others and not to me? Right? It's not to practice for me. So I think it's a very important reflection for all of us all the time, but I'd say especially for Brazilians with the elections happening next week, to see how are we putting ourselves in the world as spiritists.
And also, this is one of the things that happen a lot, right, Anna? Because it's exactly the confusion that happens. Because Spiritism is perfect, but the Spiritist movement is not. So people confuse that, because we are trying to be Spiritists, but all of us are imperfect. perfect. So it's harder, right? If you're not giving an example, lots of people can judge you. Oh, you're a spiritist. Why are you doing that, right? So we have to be really careful, because although we are trying to be better and better all the time, if you make a mistake, you can be judged because you're a spiritist. Well, how a spiritist is doing that, right? But we are imperfect. We're still trying.
I think they're great invitations for us to reflect if we're not letting our humility. I feel practicing humility. Is I'm spiritist. Do I really think I have better knowledge than everyone else? Do I really? Because sometimes we say that we don't, but here inside we feel, they don't know what they're talking about because they don't know all these teachings. So I think it's really nice to bring to ourselves and not keep pointing fingers.
Oh yeah.
Which is, I could say, one of the main reasons why Kardec, in his classification here, he said imperfect spirits and true spirits. He never said perfect spiritists, right? Because that's not something attainable here. And the spirits actually get asked that question by Kardec. He's like, well, what about the perfect spirits? And then the answer is pretty simple. It's like, oh my God, look at you, still trying to make perfection of something that's not attainable right now. What makes a true spiritist is not being perfect, but is trying, is making the efforts to, like they said, tame our bad inclinations and transforming ourselves morally. It is a process, right?
And probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, Victor, but probably the true spiritist doesn't even reincarnate anymore. I guess. I don't know. But I guess it's just a little bit of them, unless they have a mission. But
the pure spirits will not. They don't have to. They could if they want.
Yeah, the true spirits would as well. Would
they don't have to have the spiritist title, let's say that. Right?
Yeah. The true would still reincarnate because, again, the true spirit is the one that's a work in progress. It's the one that is doing efforts to tame their bad inclinations.
Right.
Whereas the perfect ones would be the pure spirits. That, correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Go ahead.
So, talking about true spiritists, for me, I just remember a scene on the Tivaldo's movie, and his mentor, like Jonah, asked him, "Do you want to be a true spiritist?" So, not just study, but put on practice. Why are you studying? And she gave an example of a person, someone who works in a spirit movement, and she doesn't know how to read, but she put on practice, like everything she learned in her experience. So I don't think this. I think there are some true spiritists here, but not true.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually something we'll touch upon a little bit later, is the fact how the true spirits that we do have already here, they serve as great examples and motivations for us to be able, as something that it's attainable, it's something that we can become. Right? For example, you gave the example of Divaldo. When we think about Chico Xavier and we start to reflect upon his life, it's always motivational to do that, because we're seeing some true spiritists that shows us that it's possible.
And just
I
think you don't need to be famous to be a true spiritist.
No.
Like Divaldo or Chico or Ivone. No, you just need to be like Christ, like Jesus, and that's it. Like you don't need to have success or
absolutely. It's very simple in quotation, right? It's simply the person who is making the efforts to tame their evil inclinations and through that transforming themselves morally.
May I, Victor?
Yes, please go ahead.
For me personally, every journey is personal, but for me personally, the key word here is recognizing. For me, who was so involved with the Spiritist Center, and because of professional reasons, now I am not as in tune anymore. With me, what I see is the whole sliding. Like you are in symphony, and you are in that frequency, so it's like easier to recognize. But as you go further away, you start to slide. And then for me, the key word is recognize. So like, let's go back. So I identify some behavior in myself, like I start getting annoyed with patients at the hospital, and then I have to recognize and go back, like, why am I getting annoyed? What is bringing that feeling on? What can I do about it? So for me personally, the recognizing is the key word, because that's what's going to help you go back to the path that you know you're supposed. And in that sliding, that's where you go through all the other three phases, right? You are the exalted, like, how come people don't know? So, and so for me, the recognition is the first step. You can't change something in yourself that you don't even recognize.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Recognizing would be the first step is recognition and efforts, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
First you recognize, and then you put some effort.
Absolutely.
Can I go?
And I think that also, like, it is very important to identify all this, but also keep in mind that we always have to have compassion towards ourselves. And it's okay that we recognize our mistakes and what we have to improve, but always have compassion to ourselves and make sure we're not harming our emotions or making ourselves to feel actually even worse, because we're always judging. So it's part of the society to be very judgmental towards others. So that's the part I think is like most challenging. Having compassion towards ourselves and taking care after our feelings and our heart, so we don't get into that position of feeling like we are not actually successful in, making progress.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great addition.
And also remember that it's always a marathon. It's not a sprint, right?
Yes, exactly. It's not a sprint.
A huge effort means a very tiny step, and we need to know that.
Yeah, the sprints tend to burn out. Right? Yeah.
So one thing I want to talk about the recognition is being a little bit more deep. You need to have a strong self-knowledge. If you know about yourself, you can recognize your challenges, your imperfections, and things you need to learn and you need to improve. So if you know yourself, you can be more compassionate with you, you can understand you more, you can forgive yourself like easier. I think that's why being Spiritist is not too easy, because staying stay in front of the mirror, like see to ourselves is not too easy, like, because if you are reflect about your actions or about your mindset, and if you are not, let's say, if you're not happy with that, you need to change. So I think Spiritism invite us to change, reflect, and to try how can I be better. Like it's a kind of make us a little bit uncomfortable. Like,
but it's part of it, right? And that all means the moral transformation. That's all part of the moral transformation. That whole aspect of recognizing the things that we're doing that perhaps we can improve, being able to recognize that with compassion, with love. That is all a moral transformation. That's why the word transformation is here, right? It's a whole process. It's not a switch that you flip on and off, right?
I think you said it, and you just restated it again. When this conversation started, it almost started off from there. You said it's a process rather than a destination. And there's a tendency to in all sorts of ways, but in Spiritism as well, that as soon as you accept or adopt the principles, it's like some sort of light switch, like we're all the disciples of the Pentecost, and all of a sudden the Holy Spirit just fills us up, and that's it, we're done, you know, we can just move on. But it's literally just the embrace of a certain set of moral principles, and that leads to a transformation through a larger process that at some point may very well have a destination, but I think that's kind of besides the point.
Yeah.
The point is that you're willing to embrace the process, and then with everything that everyone has said that's so true, demonstrates the beautiful examples of which how this process can play itself out in so many intricate and profound ways that it still goes back to, and when we fall, we recognize, well, it's a process. You get back up and then you pull it back.
Try again.
I'll be a true Spiritist today, I'll be an exalted tomorrow, and then, you know, I'll try again the day after.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you were saying, absolutely, the destination is simply a consequence of the process, right? The focus is the process, that day-to-day work and effort. And then we can start feeling, as Jesus, hi, come on in. As Jesus mentioned, right, in Matthew 11:28, I think, when he talks about when we are walking with him, our burden and the yoke is easy and the burden is light, but it doesn't mean that we're not having to make efforts. We are making efforts, but we can, throughout our journey, already be able to enjoy a little bit of peace and a little bit of happiness. So, oh man, I'm loving the interaction here today. And it started a little not very interactive in the beginning, but thank you so much. This is great. This is great. So the text, again, like the text to be Spiritist that we're talking about here today, like I said in the beginning, Emmanuel brings a passage from the Gospel, a passage from the Gospel of Spiritism, and then he gives us an interpretation. So this is the passage from the Gospel that he brings when Jesus says in John 16, I'll put both in. He says, I have told you these things so that you may have peace. In this world you will have troubles, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Em português, tenho-vos dito isso para que em mim tenhais paz. No mundo tereis aflições, mas tende bom ânimo, eu venci o mundo. So here he's starting to tell us that when we start to follow his examples, his teachings, and we start to take those into our lives, we may have peace. But that does not mean that we won't have difficult times, that we won't have tribulations, right? That's why right after he says, in this word, you will have trouble. That's not up for debate. He's actually saying you will, right? Not you may. You will have troubles. But when we are following his words, living his words, we may find peace in those tribulations. So much so that he says, take heart, or in Portuguese, tende bom ânimo, you know? Don't lose hope, because tribulations are part of life. That shouldn't take your hope away. But when you are being able to experience some peace during those tribulations, that gives us hope. That gives us hope that things will pass. So much so that he said he has overcome the world. He has gone through many of the things that we are going through right now, and he succeeded, and he is Christ today. Right? So he gives us hope that we can do the same, and eventually we can be Christ as well. And to the text that we read at the very beginning, Emmanuel was talking about the mercy of God, which goes along with what you just said, Attila, when he said, when Emmanuel says that the mercy from God always never runs out. Right? We always have a second, a third, and a fourth chance. And the fact that God's mercy through these tribulations that we go through, those are nothing more than opportunities for us to learn. The same as we go through in school. Right? In school, every grade that we go through, we have a test. to see if we've learned, right? When we're in grade 2, we take a test that is meaningful for somebody from grade 2. Grade 8, we take a test that's meaningful and goes along with the teachings from grade 8. We're never getting a test in grade 2 that would be given to grade 8, because that's not in line with our level of knowledge. And God, in His loving kindness and His mercy, He will always give us the tests that are in line with our level of understanding, with our level of evolution. Because He wants us to succeed. He doesn't give us tests for us to fail. He loves us. He gives us those tests because He wants us to succeed. And He knows that we can. He'll never give us a test from grade 8 if our knowledge is at grade 2. He'll always give us what we can succeed. And I'm going to speed up a little bit. So, like I said, Emmanuel brings a passage from the Gospel of Jesus, like we just saw. And this is the passage from the Gospel of Spiritism, this book here, that talks about the same thing. Right, to show again how Spiritism and Christianity are aligned. Kardec says, go and thank God for the glorious task He has entrusted to you. But watch out, among those called to Spiritism, many went astray. Therefore, repair your way and follow the truth. Em português, e de agradecer a Deus a gloriosa tarefa que Ele vos confiou. Mas atenção, entre os chamados para o Espiritismo, muitos se transviaram. Reparai, pois, vosso caminho e segui a verdade. So this goes along again with a lot of the things that we just talked about here today. Right? The more we know, the more we learn in school. Right? Tougher tests we'll have in school. The same with life. Right? The more it's given to us, the more responsibility we have. But that doesn't mean that we can't succeed. Right? Because again, our knowledge, our evolution will be in line, we will have all the tools that we need to overcome those troubles. And then he says, among those called to Spiritism, many went astray. And when I go back to the types of Spiritism, especially the exalted ones, right, those have characteristics that tend to go astray, right? Because it's like, it's those of us who are trying to run a sprint ended up burning out and ended up going astray. Now, Kardec always gives us a message of hope. He says that even if we go astray, and we might go astray every day, right? We might have thoughts that go 7 times a day, you know? It might happen multiple times a day, but he gives us hope saying that repair is possible, right? So identify it, like he was saying. Being able to identify, oh, this was me going a little bit astray. We have the opportunity to go back and to follow the truth, like Mary was saying, with compassion, with love. Right? Because when we start to be able to recognize our difficulties and with love, repairing them, that will always allow us to be more compassionate with others as well. Right? And then a question. A reflection. I can't remember. Oh yeah, Portuguese and English. So, a question to you all. Has the knowledge that Spiritism bring us been transformed into experience, or has it remained as a Spiritist theory? Which is something that we've been talking about here, right? Os conhecimentos que o Espiritismo nos traz, eles têm se transformado em vivência, ou eles têm ficado em teoria na nossa cabeça? And as I was thinking about this, one gauge that we can use, uma coisa que nós podemos usar para medir, thank you, is how much of the teachings are we using to change us, or how much of the teachings are we using to judge others? Because when we are in the process of judging others, that means the knowledge, all the learnings, they're still here. We haven't applied them in our lives. So to me, that is the gauge. And it's something that makes sense. We can use that. The moment we start to, judge others a lot, that's a sign. That can be a sign that can help us recognize, hold on, maybe I'm not applying that into my life, and I'm occupying myself with with others. Any thoughts? Or any comments? This, by the way, this is a message from the spirit called Erasto in the Gospel according to Spiritism. And okay, so now we've got 15 minutes. We're actually going to start the text. So 45 minutes into the talk, we're actually starting the text, which we will not finish, but that's okay. So Emmanuel starts this text, first sentence. He says that the doutrina espírita Cristianismo Renascente, or Spiritist doctrine, Renaissance Christianity, or the rebirth of Christianity. Again, this comes to show us the purpose of Spiritism. It comes to give us different lenses on the gospel of Jesus. It doesn't come to revolutionize, but it comes to enlighten us to the gospel. Why? Because right in this stage with Spiritism coming to light, one of the reasons why it came now is because we are able to understand it. We have reached a level of evolution that allows us to understand it. That's why Jesus didn't bring it to almost 2,000 years ago, because back then we wouldn't have been able to understand it fully. Now we can. Yeah, that's all I have to say about this, because we've already talked a lot about the doctrine and Christianity. And Emmanuel brings this not only in this book, but in many others. And Kardec also talks about how Spiritism is that promised consoler that Jesus had promised to us in John 16, when he said that he will bring the Spirit of truth, and that will be our promise. That will be the consoler that will be with us forever, to help us, console our hearts and hopefully be this renewal of Christianity that we so much needed. And now I like this next, the second sentence of this book, this text, and there's so much we can talk about here, which is: ser espírita é constituir-se em núcleo de ação edificante, através do qual principia a nova era. Hopefully you can read that. To be a spiritist, or to be spiritist, is to become a nucleus of enlightening action, through which the new age begins. So, some of us, sometimes we think about the things that we're bringing into our lives. So all the transformation that we are going through. And sometimes we think, well, I haven't been able to help anyone yet. Or it feels like everyone around me is not moving with me. And we might feel powerless. And one of the reflections that Christ has given us is in Matthew and Luke 13, when he talks about fermento, or the yeast that we put in bread. He says that we put just a tiny little bit of yeast, and that's enough to make a whole cake grow. Jesus, right after that parable, right after that teaching, he talks about the mustard seed, which, hey, you've worked with the kids a lot about mustard seeds, right? It's how it starts. It's so tiny, but with that constant work, it can become something huge. And here, the reflection is about that little candle that you're seeing there. Tiny little candle. And we can think of ourselves as that little candle, that little flame of fire, being that tiny little light that we have within us that is part of our daily moral transformation, and how that tiny little candle can come close to another candle that's not lit up. And no matter how big our flame is, that little candle is able to help this one light up, and the next one light up, and the next one light up. And an interesting part about this is that when you have one candle lighting up the other, this original one does not lose their flame. Their flame is untouched. Their flame is just as big as it was before. So it's like Joanna Gingerlis tells us about love. Love and the light that we're talking about, our moral examples, they don't go in vain. The more we share, the more they grow.
It doesn't split, it multiplies.
Exactly, it doesn't split, it multiplies. Thank you. Right? The more it grows, and just bigger, like it grows by multiplying. Exactly. And yeah, that was the reflection about the candle that really struck me. Is like, you know, you're using one tiny little candle to light up so many others, and that one is still lit up, right? It never loses its power. And so yeah, that's what we see here. To be Spiritist is to become the nucleus of enlightening action. So this enlightening action, by living Spiritism, by bringing Spiritism and all the teachings into our actions, we can become these enlightening actions. Why are they enlightening? Because they can provide inspiration, if you will, to others. And through that, become the new age, or begins the new age. It is through our actions, our small little actions, right, that we will start to influence others. And through that, the new age, I guess, as they say, begin. That's where it starts. It starts with this tiny little candle, right, doing their efforts day in and day out. That eventually it grows, and then all of a sudden this new age begins. And the example that Atu gives here is, just to bring this a little bit to context, it's around, the word in Portuguese is to revidar. So in English it would be those, let's paint a picture, I guess, to make more sense of it. When somebody offends me, and I go and I, fight back, and I receive that offense, and I immediately fight back with the same amount of rage, the same amount of hatred, and that's just something that I do constantly. Every time I'm offended, I fight back, and I repay that with the same level of anger, and then we have there, a true Spiritist. And then, when she's offended, she doesn't fight back. She just takes that offense and doesn't fight back with with rage or with hatred. But to me, whenever you're offended, I have to fight back and I have to repay with that same hatred. And then I start to watch, and I realize, well, maybe there is a different way. Maybe I don't always have to fight back. Maybe there is another way where I don't have to fight back. So I start to realize there is a different way. There is another way to behave. And then I start to look at it a little bit further, start to reflect a little bit more, and I realize that when somebody offends her and she doesn't fight back, she is very serene. She's very confident on herself, and she's feeling good. Even though somebody's offending her, she still can keep that serenity, keep that composure. And then I start to realize, well, when I fight back, I feel pretty bad. I feel a lot of hatred just boiling up, and I regret what I did. So it's not a good feeling. Whereas, it feels really well. Right? So then I start to think, well, maybe I should change. Maybe I should take that example and start to do that on next time somebody offends me. Right? And that's the candle that we were talking about. In that moment, through that example from I was able to realize it and to start to spark that transformation in me. Right? And that's what Emmanuel's talking about here.
And wasn't it also Emmanuel, Victor, who said
Yeah.
The word can convince you,
Yeah. Or
but the example drags you.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think anybody who has teenage kids understand that example really perfectly. Because there comes a point where they are in their minds, in ours never, but in their minds they're ready to make their own decisions and rebel against everything and everybody. And there comes a point where you feel completely powerless. So all you can do is like try to keep your calm and be that candle, because all you can do is give the example. You can force them to do what you know is right anymore. So anybody with teenage kids has to go through that learning the hard way.
That's why it says in the Spiritist book, isn't it? Parenthood is a mission. Right?
Holy, yes, it is. It is the hardest.
But it's also a lot of learning, because you learn a lot.
I would never have learned a millionth of what I had if I hadn't had kids.
Also a lot of blessing.
Yes. Oh yeah. Just a quick particular example. A lot of times when my kids say, "But why? Why do I have to do this?" Or I remember years ago saying, "Because I'm your mom." It's almost like, okay, I should know better, right?
It is because it is.
But like just yesterday, my older son asked me a question about eating, because he was playing games all afternoon. He had not eaten until like 10:30 p.m. And then like, but why? And like, because I'm your mom, and as your mom, I have the responsibility to tell you, to teach you the good things. So I kind of made that. I don't know if it makes it any difference, but for me, okay, I'm not saying just because I'm your mom. It's because I have a responsibility here to help you educate and learn some of the things, and I need to make sure that you have the food. And he's like, and then he didn't reply back. He's like, okay, I guess that makes sense. Maybe he didn't accept, he doesn't agree, but he's like, okay, it's not just because, there is a reason.
Because I said so.
It doesn't work out with everything, but it's just like, again, just brings that reflection about the light, right? It's not by imposing, it's not by because I know better, because I'm the mom, because I should know. A lot of things, yes, I have more life experience, but doesn't know I know better. I'm learning. But it's through actions and the changes that I can see on me, that I can see that it's affecting them. Some things like, oh, they might one day in the future see, oh yeah. But sometimes I already see a little few changes here and there. Like even on their responses that fight back, that like, well, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. At the same time, you can't expect that a 15-year-old will behave as a 40-year-old, right? They are in the process of learning.
Sometimes
right?
the 15-year-old
easy to say for the non-parent.
Yeah, depending on the person.
Yeah,
but and yeah, just to end this one here, it's when Paul tells us in the second letter to the Corinthians, he says, "If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation." Or quem está em Cristo, nova criatura é. So this just brings us light into how much applying the teachings of Christ can renew ourselves daily. Right? It's that new creation. It's basically the world that we wish to live in starts in our own transformations. Right? So we can become the world that we want to live in. And I'm going to skip.
I think we might need to do part 1 and part 2.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Stay tuned for part 2.
Yes. I will skip to the last one. Oh, this is great. I'm really happy. So, basically the last sentence of the text is, in view of all this that we talked about, if you can do much for the benefit of others for what you know, you will only be able to renew your fellow men for what you are. So here is the reflection about being a Spiritist, right? As opposed to talking Spiritist words or being called a Spiritist. but instead of just saying the words, being a Spiritist. Which brings to what Carol said, which Emmanuel brings us in the book at Religion of Spirits, I think, when he says that it's the example that drags. It's the example that influences others to change, right? So he will only be able to renew your fellow men for what you are, not what you say, but for what you are. And that's why Jesus is it is our guide and model, as the Spirits told us, because he didn't write anything. He was a living example of love. He was a living example of all his teachings, and that's why he, till this day, inspires us and will keep inspiring us for many years to come. It's because he walked the talk, right? He truly lived everything he was saying, and with more attainable or more with closer examples, like we have Francis of Assisi or even Chico Xavier, and each person has their own, right, who they can relate better. It's through their actions, it's through their lives that we can be inspired and realize that we can too get there eventually. So that's all I had to bring today. I really appreciate all your guys' help. This was amazing. It made it a lot more interactive. And if you have any comments or questions towards the end. If not, thank you all, and we'll finish with a prayer, and then we have our passes in that little room right after. So may we close our eyes, take a deep breath, and thank Jesus and our guardian angels for the exchange of knowledge, the exchange of feelings that we had here today. And we ask you, Master, that you help us internalize your words and be able to action them in our lives. That we can be inspired by your examples, so our examples become written paragraphs of your gospel. May we find the hope, the faith, the peace in our daily lives, asking ourselves, what would Jesus do? And in doing so, Master, start to become the transformation that we want to see around us. Thank you again for the lovely opportunity of being together this Sunday morning, and may we be in peace. So be it.